This passage is about the Russia-Ukraine conflict, its effects on the world. Let's quickly summarize the passage. The Russia-Ukraine war has revealed an increasingly complex international picture. Important emerging economies such as Brazil, India, and South Africa have refused to take a clear stand. So, what's the interesting picture? There are certain countries which have not taken a clear stand on the issue. They have not condemned Russia. They have not openly supported Ukraine. So, their stand has been rather unclear, ambiguous. So too have most of the Gulf states. Brazil, India, South Africa, and most of the Gulf states have not taken a clear stand in the Ukraine conflict. All are behaving strictly according to their national interest. When they assess their new great power conflict, they see not only economic advantages but also opportunities to enhance their own geopolitical and diplomatic stand. So during the war, what did they do? They acted according to their national interests. So in this global power tussle, US on one side, USSR on one side, these people found they have a lot of benefits in the war. Another benefit is they have there is a situation where they can improve their own geopolitical and diplomatic standing, according to the author. There is no doubt that the so-called global south will play a major role in the emerging struggle for dominance in the 21st century. There is no doubt that these countries, which are called the global south, will play a greater role in the 21st century. That much is already obvious after 13 months of war in Ukraine. Unfortunately, many of these countries and regions will remember the treatment they received from the West, particularly its leading power, US. All these countries, when they take steps in the future, they'll remember one thing: how has the US treated us? Their participation in confronting powers like China cannot be assumed. You cannot take for granted how they're going to get involved. If there's a confrontation with China, their participation, their support cannot be taken for granted. It will have to be won. So the West has to win their support. If there's a confrontation with China, if there's a situation when you have to confront China, you cannot bank on the automatic support of these countries. You have to earn it. In any case, beyond those directly affected by the fighting, Europe will be the region most changed by the Russia's aggression. Which area is going to be most affected in the Ukraine conflict? It's Europe. The war is being waged in its own immediate neighborhood. It was started by an authoritarian regime that embodies values completely antithetical to its own. With the illusion of peace shattered, Europe's task now. So, one, the war is in its immediate neighborhood, right? Russia, Ukraine, very close to Europe. So, in its immediate neighborhood. Second, it says the war was started by a regime which is totally opposite to Europe in its ideals, according to the author. With the illusion of peace shattered, Europe faces many challenges. What are the challenges? It has to overcome its internal divisions and its defenselessness as soon as possible. That means right now, Europe has internal divisions. Europe is defenseless. It has to get over these two challenges first, as soon as possible. It must become a geopolitical power capable of self-defense and deterrence, including nuclear capability. It should be in a stronger position. It should get over its internal conflicts. It should become stronger, become a geopolitical power. It should have defense and should have the power of deterrence, stopping somebody. Deter means to prevent an attack on itself. And this includes having nuclear capability. This will not be easy. To do all this, face all these challenges, is not going to be easy. And the path ahead is strewn with hazards. It faces problems. It's not going to be easy facing all these challenges. And there are many problems ahead. Consider some of the worst case scenarios. So he's telling you what are the problems Europe is going to face. What will Europe do if another America First isolationist is elected to the White House next year? What will you do if the next American president says America first and isolates itself, says, I'm not bothered what's happening in Europe, what's happening in Ukraine? What will it do? Followed by the ascent of a French right-wing leader to the... What will happen if France, there's the rise of the right wing, America, there's an isolationist president who says America first, I'm not bothered about the rest of the world. This outcome is a distinct possibility. So when Europe has all these challenges, it's not going to be easy to overcome these challenges, because it will also have an international challenge of an America which is isolationist and a France which is led by the right wing. With Russia unable to defeat Ukraine on the battlefield, the war will eventually be ended through difficult negotiations. What is going on? Probably it will end through very difficult negotiation. Whatever the outcome, whether Russia wins the war, Ukraine wins the war, negotiations happen, whatever be the outcome, Europe will be living in a different world. Europe will suddenly be in a different world. It will have to adjust to the existence of a perpetual threat from the east, regardless of who is the head of the government. Whatever the outcome of the war, Europe is going to have one problem. It's have a perpetual threat from the east, from Russia, regardless of who is in power. Regardless of who's there, Russia is going to be a threat. Regardless of the government, regardless of the prime minister, president who's leading there, it's going to face a threat from the east. Although the EU will have gained more internal stability, its basic character will have changed. It may become stable internally, but its basic character is going to change. Security will be a central concern for the foreseeable future. What will be the biggest concern or worry for EU? Security. The EU will have to start thinking of itself as a geopolitical power and as a defense community working closely with NATO. It will have to think of itself as a defense power. It will have to think of itself as a work closely with the NATO countries. Its identity will no longer be defined mainly by its economic community, its common market, or its customs union. EU right now is known as an economic community, but the author says it will no longer be seen as that. It has to become a geopolitical power. The bloc has already accepted Ukraine as a candidate for future membership, and that decision was based not on economic considerations but on geopolitical considerations. A great revision of the world order is underway. So right now, what are we seeing? We are seeing big changes in the world order. If this struggle plays out according to traditional power politics, everyone will be worse off. If you have the struggle of power now going the traditional way, no one will benefit. Everyone will be a loser, will be worse off. So what should the government do? Cooperation must prevail if we are to create an order adequate to the economic security and climate changes of the 21st century. Countries should cooperate so that the international community is going to face threats, multiple threats. What kind of threats? Economic threats, security threats, and climate threats. So the only way out is through cooperation. If the traditional world order, and the world order is changing, if traditional forces are allowed to continue, then everybody will be the loser. So because of the changing world order, we have to cooperate to try to see if you can form a system which can face upcoming challenges better. That is the second paragraph in gist. The Ukraine war, the effects, the EU has been worst affected, Europe has been worst affected, and Europe must find a way to become a geopolitical power. There has to be international cooperation to see that we face challenges in the future. These are the main points. Let's look at the questions. Which of the following scenarios could be a potential consequence for Europe if an America First isolationist is elected to the White House, followed by the ascent of a French right-wing leader? If this happens, if France has a right-wing leader, and what would be the consequence for Europe? If you remember, in the summary we discussed, the author said Europe has to face challenges. What are the challenges? It has to overcome its internal divisions. It has to try to become a geopolitical power. It has to seek international cooperation. But think it had a lot of hazards in trying to become a geopolitical power, trying to improve its security, become a deterrent also to any kind of attacks. It should also develop nuclear capability, including nuclear capability. It has to try to become a geopolitical power, a potential deterrent, and including nuclear capability, it has to start developing things. But in trying to do this, is going to face problem. The problem would be the White House. So what will happen if America has an isolationist president and France has a right-wing leader? Europe is going to have problems in overcoming the present problems and becoming a geopolitical power, right? That's what the author says. Let's look at the option which comes closest to it. An isolationist in America may hinder international cooperation, and the right wing's rise may mean more internal divisions for Europe. Did he say it will mean more internal divisions for Europe? Impeding Europe's nuclear ambitions. Now, what is wrong with this? They'll pose problems for Europe. That's what the option said. He said it should try to get more geopolitical power. It should become a geopolitical power, a global deterrent for attacks. And if this includes developing nuclear weapons, it should do it. But the option seems to focus mostly on Europe's nuclear ambitions. It says impeding Europe's nuclear ambitions. It will impede Europe's unification efforts, impede Europe's efforts to become a global geopolitical power. But here the focus seems to be only on impeding its nuclear ambitions, which is not the author's main point. So this seems to be a little too, this part of it shifts the focus from the main point. An isolationist in America and a nationalist in France. The other problem is, and the right wing's rise. Right wing's rise in France had to be mentioned. So A is also vague in that. Here it's clear. An isolationist in America and a nationalist in France may hinder international cooperation, internal cooperation in Europe, respectively, impeding Europe's effort to become a geopolitical power. Okay, and all that is required to become a geopolitical power, including building nuclear capabilities, is included in this answer. So this looks like a good option. An isolationist in America and a nationalist in France may collude with each other. Did he say that these two will come together and thwart Europe's ambitions? No. So that word clearly shows us this is wrong. Option said if you have an unfriendly president, an isolationist president in America and the right-wing leader in France, these two together will create more problems for Europe. But he didn't say they two will come together and start causing problems. So that's what the option says. So C is gone, eliminated. An isolationist in America may fuel tensions in Europe for their advantage, and a nationalist in France may be concerned only with their own country, impeding peace and progress in Europe. This is saying things which is not being said in the passage. Right. Therefore, the correct answer is B. Next question. According to the passage, why is it important for Europe to become a geopolitical power capable of self-defense and deterrence, including nuclear capability? What is the main reason for the author to say that Europe should start becoming a geopolitical power, capable of self-defense, deterrence, including nuclear capabilities? What did the author mention as the central concern for Europe? If you go back to the passage, the author says the central concern is security. It faces a permanent threat from Russia, from the east, regardless of who's in power, right? So we have to look at an option which would focus on that. Let's look at the answers. To enhance its economic and political standing in the world, EU is already seen as an economic community. The author says it should go beyond. It should not be seen only as an economic community. It should be seen as a geopolitical power. So this is not the main concern. to maintain its internal stability. He says even if it after the war it may regain its internal stability, but the biggest concern will be security. So not the maintenance of its internal stability. That's not the main concern. To protect itself from a constant danger, threat from this. Always worried about the East and the threat from the East. That's the central concern. The central concern is security. The constant threat from the East, which is C. To become the next hegemonic, no, to become the next global geopolitical power, right? But the question is asking, why is it important to become a geopolitical power? To become a hegemonic power is not the answer. As a geopolitical power, it will develop capability. It will develop the capacity of deterrence. That is why it is important. Why? Because there's a constant threat from the East. There's a constant threat from Russia. East means Russia here, right? So the answer is C. What can be inferred from the sentence? Their participation in confronting powers like China cannot be assumed. Just read the statement. Statement comes in the first paragraph where the author first says that, look, the first part of the passage where the author says, look, during this conflict, what has happened? Certain countries, India, Brazil, all these countries of the Gulf, all these countries have not taken a clear stand on the conflict. They have acted according to their national interests. All right. And he says that they are going to, whatever they do, their strategy is going to be based on their national interest. Second thing, he says that if we have to confront China, you cannot, which is the statement, their participation in confronting powers like China cannot be, you cannot take the support of these countries for granted. These countries will look at a situation and take a call based on their national interest, what will help them most. So he says their support, their participation has to be won, has to be earned. You have to win their support. You can't just say, okay, you can take it for granted, they're going to support. That's what the option means. Let's look at the option. The global South will side with China in a conflict against Western powers. Did he say that? He said they will not support the Western countries and the US. That does not mean he says they will side with China. This is going extreme. The global South will participate in confronting powers like China only if it's in their national interest. You can't take it for granted. You have to win it. And only if they convince, they're going to act according to their national interest, just like they've done in the conflict. So you can't take their support for granted. You can't assume that they're going to support you. Therefore, 2 looks like a good answer. Let's look at C and D. The global South will confront with China only if it gets better treatment and ill treatment from China. Did he mention these? Ill treatment from China has not been mentioned at all. So this expression is alien to the passage, out of scope. Therefore, not my right answer. Global South will not act according to the assumptions of the West. It will form a dynamic international policy. Has it said anything about dynamic international policy? So this again, creative terms, not part of the passage. Therefore, we cannot take it as part of the answer option either. So the correct answer is B. Which of the following is closest to the message conveyed by the last paragraph? Let's quickly look at the last paragraph and then we'll look at what is the message. We will first decide what is the message conveyed in our own words and then we'll look at the option. This is the last paragraph. A great revision of the world order is underway. The world order is changing, is getting overhauled, is changing. Okay, in a very big way, in a significant way, a great revision of the world order is underway. If this struggle plays out according to the traditional power politics, if this changing world order follows the traditional power politics, everybody will be worse off. If we follow the traditional power games, if it follows the path of the traditional power games, then everybody will be a loser. So what is the author suggesting? Cooperation must prevail. We must cooperate to create an order, to create a new kind of order adequate to the great economic security and climate challenges of the 21st century. So we need a world order which can cope, which can handle, which can face the new kind of challenges thrown at us by the 21st century. That's what he says. The world order is changing. Traditional way of if it pans out according to the traditional power politics, then it's not going to work. So we need a new world order capable of coping with all these new challenges of the 21st century. So our question is asking us, what can you infer from the message? Which of the following is closest to the message conveyed by the last paragraph? What is the message of the last paragraph? In which option best describes the message conveyed by the last paragraph? The struggle for dominance between great powers will ultimately benefit everyone. Will the struggle for benefits of the great struggle for dominance ultimately benefit through increased cooperation? If it goes the traditional way, everybody will lose. The author is saying you must cooperate. He did not say the traditional struggle for dominance will lead to greater cooperation. So this is eliminated. The shifting world order necessitates a reversion to traditional power politics in order to address the changes of the 21st century. Two things. The option is saying we need to go back, reversion, going back to an earlier state. So author is saying we need to go back to the traditional world order to address the challenges of the 21st century. Exactly opposite of what it's conveying. Right? He's saying the world order is being revised. He did not use the word reversion. The option uses the word reversion, which means going back to the traditional state. The author is saying the traditional world order is not adequate. We need a new world order which is adequate to face the challenges of the 21st century. So second is out. The world order is undergoing a significant shift that will lead to a more stable and secure future for all. But how? How? It is undergoing a traditional great significant shift. Agreed. How the option is very vague. It just says it will lead to a greater future. How? Only if there is international cooperation. The author says we need to cooperate. International cooperation must prevail so that we can have a world order, we can face the challenges. This just says the world order is changing into a better order. Right? So vague. The changing world order requires a reimagining of the role of nation states as traditional power structures are no longer effecting. Traditional power structures not working. We need cooperation for a better world order so that we can face the latest challenges. So he is trying to tell you change. You need to reimagine a world order because the traditional order is not working. So D is the closest to what we have rephrased. So the correct answer is D.